Hi everyone, and welcome back to... Wait, where am I? I'm sure there's a light switch around here somewhere. It's been so long I've forgotten where things are. Hang on. Yeah, there it is. Welcome back to the Retro Shack. Here at the Shack, we'd like to give a huge thank you to the sponsor for this video, PCBWay. They help us out with all of our PCB fabrication needs and make fantastic boards at amazingly competitive prices. And it's not only PCBs that are on the menu. Apart from other fabrication services like CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication and injection moulding, PCBWay also have a great projects library of cool stuff to build from people all around the world. Oh, and if you don't like waving a soldering iron about, they can even assemble your PCBs for you. That's the PCB way. Right, on with the show. This, as you will probably know, is a Sinclair ZX Spectrum 48K. Nice, isn't it? Iconic, you might say. This isn't a Sinclair ZX Spectrum 48K, it's the Spectrum, the latest retro home micro reincarnation, recreation, reproduction, reimagining, or however else you might think of it, from Retro Games. Yes, this is the same Retro Games that did the C64, which is in frequent use in the Shack, the Amiga 500 Mini, which gets an outing when I'm away and don't want to lug stuff about, the Atari 400 Mini, which I can't comment on because I didn't get sent one for review and couldn't think of a reason to buy one for myself, and the little C64 Mini, which is so darn cute that I want one as a pet. In line with the C64, which came with 64 preloaded and fully licensed games, the Spectrum, in the form of a Spectrum 48K, comes preloaded with 48 games, and we'll look through those a little later. Let's see what comes in the very nicely presented box. My choice of box opener this episode is a small cheese knife, available from all good cheeseries. Inside that box is another box, but this one has a rather nice stylized line drawing of the Spectrum. And now for the big reveal. Oh, the anticipation. Let's get that plastic cover off and lift out the Spectrum. Before we look at the unit, what else is in here? Well, there's a thin manual and a small copy of Crash magazine specifically commissioned for this release. There's another box at the bottom here, and that contains the USB power cable, but no wall charger, and the HDMI cable. So, what about the Spectrum itself? Well, let's peel off this keyboard protection first. Okay, well, first impressions are good. It looks like a proper Spectrum. Up here we've got Retro the Spectrum instead of Sinclair ZX Spectrum, but other than that, it looks remarkably like the original. How much like the original? Well, let's compare. Size-wise, it's spot on, and the texture of the plastic case is perfect as well. The keyboard colour seems good too, allowing for differences in age. Remember that the original 16K Spectrum had a slightly lighter keyboard, but this matches up well to the 48K. Next to each other, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference, if you couldn't read of course. So, from all angles, we've got a good reproduction, but then again, we've been able to get perfect reproduction cases for many years now, so perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that this is so good. Around the back, we can see where the limitations of this machine lie, along with its stablemate, the C64. It's a software-only emulation. There's no expansion port or ear and mic ports, so this machine can't replace your Spectrum entirely if you have any hardware components you want to use. We have a home button, a few USB ports for joysticks, another USB port if you want to add your own games. This can be done by either using your own USB stick or this rather cute official microdrive USB stick, which oddly isn't included as part of the standard package, but is available as a separate purchase on the Retro Games site. There's the HDMI port, the 5V DC USB-C port, a power LED and a power switch, and that's your lot. The bottom of the Spectrum really did start to set off my OCD though, as there are a couple of design choices I can't really get my head around. On the one hand, they've put all of the screw holes in the same place as the original Spectrum, and they didn't need to, it's just a nice touch. But then they've put the speaker output and the vent in different places, which I can't believe is necessary given that sound comes out of the TV anyway, and this thing can't run hot enough to warrant special cooling. Just seems an odd design choice. Okay, let's open her up and see what's inside. Okay, probably as expected, not a lot, but also in real terms, i.e. in terms of the amount of actual power and complexity, hundreds if not thousands of times more electro-loveliness than in the original. Ironic really, and I love and hate that retro games have opted to use the same membrane technology as the original Spectrum and the same 5 and 8 way Molex connectors, but it's all in a different place and configuration, which makes it non-interchangeable with a real machine. There are a lot of weights in here. I'm not sure if this is to make the thing weigh the same as a real Spectrum, and I'm not going to check because that's both nonsense if it does and if it doesn't. In fact, I'd be more annoyed if there was this much weight added and it still didn't weigh the same as the original. Not much to see here. It's gubbins running an emulator on one board and another board which appears to be nothing more than a USB hub and the controller for the keyboard matrix. So let's get it put back together, plugged in, and we can take a look at what really matters. What's it like to use? Well, pushing the power button gives us a bit of a blank screen for a few moments, and then a simple "The Spectrum" pops up, and we then have to choose our language. I was happy to find that as well as using the Spectrum direction keys 5, 6, 7, 8 and 0 to fire, fan favourites Q, A, O, P and M will also work. We'll select English porque solo hablo un poco de español. De hecho, eso es lo único que sé en español. Next, we have to choose our output frequency. 50 Hz is the way to go here unless you absolutely have no choice. Most software for the Speccy was created for PAL machines at 50 Hz. Looks like this telly supports that just fine, so we'll press L to accept that, and we find ourselves in a familiar retro games carousel. Okay, Alien Girl Skirmish Edition would not have made my top 100 guesses for the first game in the carousel, but then it is in alphabetical order. Ant Attack, good solid fan favourite. Auf Wiedersehen Monty, likewise. Avalon, never played it, but very good. Bobby Bearing, never played it. Cosmic Playback, space shooter. No, that one. El Stompo, another new game. Exelon, classic. Fairlight, another classic. Firelord, another classic. We're doing well so far. Football Manager, Freddy Harvest and so on. Look, there's a few good games in here, a couple of real classics, but there are some major omissions as well. Maybe this is licensing, but there's no jetpack, in fact nothing from the Ultimate series, but there is Horace Goes Skiing, an IP I thought was notoriously difficult to get. Lords of Midnight, Manic Miner, Match Day. You know what, there's enough good stuff here to keep most Spectrum fans happy, and of course if you need to add other games you can do through that USB port. It's not like they're difficult to find online, although of course I do expect everyone to obey all applicable copyright laws. So when we've decided on a game to play, you hit M to start, and there's none of that nostalgic but frankly irritating loading bars to worry about. It's straight into the game. Once playing, you'd never know you weren't on an original Spectrum. The feel is just right, and that's entirely down to the recreation of the tactile elements of the Speccy. Good job, Retro Games. Once you've reminded yourself just how bad you were at a particular game, it's a simple matter of pushing the home button on the back to get back to the carousel. Manic Miner, good grief, I remember being absolutely blown away by that opening music on the Spectrum when I was a kid, but now it's like fingernails down a blackboard. Yes, I know it was a technical milestone, but it sounds really bad. Okay, let's say we've been playing a game for a little while and we've messed up a bit, like in this snake game where you've trapped yourself in a corner. Well, Hitting the home button and the O key together brings up controls on the side of the screen which let you rewind up to the last 40 seconds of gameplay, so you can rewind to just before the point you went wrong and try again. Now this is genuinely a useful feature because whilst you can save and load a snapshot of the game, that requires a bit of forethought and planning. If something takes you by surprise just before you think of saving the game, this gives you a chance to rewind and either try again or just rewind to a point where you can save the game. Nice touch. Hitting the spacebar whilst in the carousel takes you into the options, and under the display section there are controls for switching on the CRT emulation, either on or off, and for changing the size of the Spectrum border from its default size to, well, off. If you're trying out one of those games that use extended colour palettes on the Spectrum called ULA+, you can switch on the extended colours option to enable support for that too. Whatever Spectrum border size you choose, you're stuck in a 4:3 ratio screen, so there are a few fancy frames to choose from if you really are bothered by the inky blackness of the void at the sides of your telly. In the advanced options you can thankfully change the volume of the music on the carousel screen, but not the tune. From the options page you can also choose whether the machine boots to the carousel or to classic mode, and this reveals that we have a custom Retro Games ROM in here. I think I'll dig a little deeper into that in a future episode to see exactly what is different about it from a standard Spectrum ROM. Also, classic mode is by default classic 48K mode, although you can change this to other machines in the options. Interestingly, you can also use your own ROM files from actual Spectrum machines if you put the ROM images onto a USB stick. This is useful should you find a title that won't work on the Retro Games ROM. Oh, and if you want the full experience of loading TAP files from a virtual cassette, you can at least change the speed of the loading, depending on how much of a masochist you are. So we mentioned earlier that you can save and load games, so how does that work? Well, each title has 4 slots to save and load from, and it's a simple task. Press home when you're in the game, which takes you back to the carousel. Press A to bring up the save and load screen, and then using P and O, drop the save game into one of those slots. And loading is the reverse. Pick a slot with a game save in it, press M to load it. Really simple. Okay, now on to the big question. What do I think of this, and would I buy it? Well, in this particular case, Retro Games have got it just right. The machine looks like a Spectrum, importantly feels like a Spectrum, is easy to use, and at under £100 in the UK, you'd be spending similar money at least to build your own replica anyway. So unless you really need the expansion port to plug anything into, this is a great way to relive those classic Spectrum moments. Hope you found this useful if you were considering getting one of these. Thanks to Retro Games for sending it in for a review, and please leave your comments below and let me know what you think. So until next time in the shack, hopefully very soon, it's goodbye from me.